Hello, and welcome to Tech Latest by Nikkei Asia, where we bring you the freshest updates from the technology sector in Asia. Every episode, one of our reporters will be filling us in on the tech news on their radar, from semiconductors in China to space travel in Japan to startups in Indonesia. From Nikkei Asia's Tokyo headquarters, I'm Alice French. In this episode, my colleague Jada Nagumo is talking with our US tech correspondent Yifan Yu about her recent coverage of TikTok, the social media app owned by Beijing-based ByteDance, which is currently facing a sell or ban bill in the US.
Hi, Yifan. Thanks for joining us on Tech Latest today.
Hi, Jada. Thanks so much for having me.
So you've been covering the busy tech scene mainly in the US for a few years now. And recently you've been following the news surrounding TikTok, the popular app's facing major challenges in America, mainly because it's owned by China's ByteDance. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on to give our listeners some background?
It's actually very interesting you say I started following this recently because, as a matter of fact, I'm sure I'm not the only one who is having a deja vu about this situation. The TikTok saga actually started very, very early on back in Trump's presidency in 2020 when the former president issued 2 executive orders to try to ban the app, but it got blocked in the court. And then after Biden took the office, the CFIUS, which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, started to look into TikTok, and they ordered ByteDance to divest TikTok last year, but no actions has been taken since then. And this bill that's being voted in House and now sent to Senate for review is the latest U.S. government action take against TikTok. It's the new one, but it's not like a first of its kind. We have been actually seeing TikTok being under regulatory scrutiny in the U.S. for quite a few years. This is just the latest action they have taken.
I see. You mentioning Donald Trump is kind of giving me memories of back then. And you recently wrote a story about TikTok in the House of Representatives passing this sell or ban bill, right?
Yes. So the House bill, which is passed on March 13th, basically dictates ByteDance to divest TikTok, all this very popular short video app. I'm sure a lot of our audience also use it. Gonna be banned in the whole country of the United States. That bill was proposed in early March and it got past the House floor in a short week, which is unprecedented anywhere. So and now I think this bill is heading to Senate vote, but there is no a timeline set for when is it gonna be voted on, or whether the Senate want to comes up with its own bill, and what's gonna happen after the Senate come out with its own bill. And my latest story is basically analysis to look into what's gonna happen to TikTok down the road.
Yes, your business spotlight story gives us a really good picture of what's happening to TikTok. And you start the piece by saying that whether the bill will actually reach President Joe Biden's desk is just one of many questions hanging over TikTok, right?
Yes. Although the House passed the bill really swiftly, like I said, in 1 week, which I've never seen any bill that passed the House this quickly, but TikTok's fate in the US is far from certain. First of all, it needs to pass the Senate vote. And like I said, the Senate might want to propose its own version of the bill. And if that's the case, the 2 chambers of the Congress, the Senate and the House, need to combine their own bills and vote on the final bill. And once the final version of the bill passes the Congress, only then it will be sent to be signed into law by the president. And after talking to some people in DC and some legal experts, I think like a lot of people are skeptical whether the Senate are going to move as quickly as the House did. And given we are in an election year, which president going to sign this into law is also a question. Will it be Biden? Will it be Trump if he's elected? So we will see.
I see. So it seems very complicated. And I know that there are concerns that the bill could violate, U.S. First Amendment rights and infringe free speech by essentially preventing users from expressing themselves, I guess. And younger voters will definitely be affected more, I think. What are you hearing over there, and how will this impact the US presidential election, as you mentioned?
So unfortunately, TikTok doesn't really have any allies in the US, actually, except its users. It has a very solid base of users, and most of them are teens and Gen Z. So those people are adamant they are not giving up using TikTok in the US. And after TikTok sent them several notifications about what's happening in Congress, they started calling Congress, their representatives, their senators. Some extreme ones even made threats to their lawmakers and even try to make suicide threats. Says, if you ban this app, I'm going to take my own life, which is not what TikTok is advocating for, obviously, but it just tells you a little bit what kind of power TikTok held among young demographics. And that's the reason a lot of senators, along with Trump, are kind of hesitant of signing on to the House bill immediately, because they know if they ban TikTok, it's going to affect their young demographics voters. And a lot of those young people who are teens right now, so they are not eligible to vote in this election cycle, but they will be eligible in the upcoming cycles. So it's going to have a long-lasting effect on how young people vote for the coming years. I think that's actually the biggest weapon in TikTok's arsenal right now. They don't have a lot of other allies, but their young users is definitely a strong weapon they can use.
I see. That's a really interesting take on the whole situation. And I guess for China watchers, the real question is, how will this affect ByteDance? So if the bill does pass the Senate, and what sort of developments can we expect to see, and what will be the major impacts to the Chinese company?
I think ByteDance is in an impossible position. Obviously, first of all, they would not want to give up the TikTok US operation, which I think Financial Times reported they generate 16 billion revenue in last year, which is just amazing for any social media company. And this is just in US alone. We are not talking about like TikTok globally or ByteDance. And I think one of the analysts estimated that TikTok US can be estimated at $100 billion. But if you take out TikTok US, let's say ByteDance decide to divest, let me remind you, ByteDance is still a pre-IPO company. If it wants to go to the public market debut, let's say this or next year, and without the TikTok US operation, their valuation gonna be at least half. So this is definitely not good for ByteDance and its shareholders. On the other hand, there's not that many options for them to find a qualified buyer in the US. Like I said, the valuation of TikTok is just whoopingly high. And if they choose like a big corporation, a social media giant like Facebook's parent company Meta, there will certainly be antitrust issues. On the other hand, the Chinese regulators are also not going to allow ByteDance to divest TikTok that easily, because according to the latest Chinese regulations, any products, companies that involve personal recommendation algorithm based on data analysis to be sold in a foreign territory, they need to clear with the Chinese Commerce Department. I think for Beijing, they have come out and said repeatedly they strongly opposes a forced divestiture of TikTok. So it's really impossible for ByteDance, even if they want to sell, even if they can find a qualified buyer in the US for a good price for TikTok, Beijing might as well block the sale. So they are really in an impossible position, in my opinion.
I see. Okay, it looks like they're in a pretty difficult situation. And do you think this is going to further escalate the China-US tech war that's been going on?
Maybe I'm an optimist. I don't think that would be the case. Even though I just mentioned Beijing might block the sale, but from what I heard in China and also talking to analysts, TikTok doesn't seem to be a very high priority issue for Beijing. During the Biden-Xi meeting in San Francisco last year, I think this issue didn't even come up during their whole days of meeting. And there are so many other issues China need to focus on right now, like economic struggle the country is facing. So even though some investors and analysts are saying Beijing might take some retaliative actions if TikTok got banned in the US, I don't think that will be the case because there aren't just that many things Beijing can do. For example, if they do decide to retribute and attacks on American big tech company like Apple or Tesla, what good would it do? Those companies generates billions of revenue in China and hire thousands of people there. And if they drive those foreign companies away, the Chinese economy would even struggle further, which is not a good thing for Beijing either. And just looking at, Apple CEO Tim Cook attend the annual China Development Forum in Beijing last week. I think at this point, Beijing still want to woo foreign companies and foreign investors. I don't think they will stoop to, go against the whole American economy and escalate the tension with the US just for TikTok.
Thanks, Yifan, for that rundown. And listeners who haven't checked out her story yet, please go check that out. And thank you, Yifan, so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, let's watch out how this situation develops.
That's all for this episode. You can read more of Yifan's reporting, along with a host of other stories about Asia's tech industry, on Nikkei Asia's website, asia.nikkei.com. And if you like what you hear, why not subscribe to our weekly Tech Asia newsletter, which will be delivered to your inbox every Thursday. There's a link to sign up in the show notes. And whilst we still have you, if you're enjoying Tech Latest and would like to support us, please do give us a follow on whichever podcast platform you use. We also really appreciate any reviews you can leave, as these help new listeners to find our episodes. Thank you for listening, and check back in next week for more updates on the tech trends that matter.